What would you do if your entire life turned out to be a lie? Could you handle the truth if the person you love had a secret that could destroy everything? In this true crime case, we reveal the horrifying story of a husband who discovers a shocking truth about his wife, one that ends in a brutal, grisly murder. In Houston, Texas, a newlywed husband uncovered a secret so dark, so devastating, that it led to one of the most gruesome crimes the city had ever seen. This isn't just a story about a hidden past or broken trust. It's about a marriage that spiraled into pure horror, shocking even the most hardened detectives. The secret was deadly, and when it came out, it tore lives apart in the most brutal way. On the outside, Marcus Johnson and Ebony Davis appeared to be a picture-perfect couple. Their love story was one straight out of a romance novel, the kind that friends envy and strangers admire. Both Marcus and Ebony were Black Americans from the vibrant city of Houston, Texas, where they first met at a community event organized by their local church. Marcus, a tall, muscular man with a rugged charm, was a 32-year-old construction worker with deep ties to his family and community. Raised in a strict, conservative household, Marcus grew up with strong values and a sense of pride in being a provider. He was known for his hard work and dedication, a man who had his life together. His friends often joked that Marcus was the kind of guy who would take care of everyone before thinking of himself. He was a protector, someone who held traditional values close to his heart, especially when it came to marriage. Ebony, on the other hand, was stunningly beautiful. At 28, she was the kind of woman who turned heads wherever she went. Tall, with a glowing brown complexion, captivating dark eyes, and an infectious smile, she worked as a hairstylist, building a name for herself in the local beauty scene. People admired her confidence and charm, but what drew most people to Ebony was her warmth and charisma. She had a way of making everyone feel special, and it wasn't long before Marcus was drawn to her like a magnet. Their courtship was quick but intense. Friends and family were surprised at how fast things moved between them. Within months of their first meeting, Marcus was bringing Ebony to every family gathering, proudly showing her off as the one. She fit seamlessly into his life, quickly winning over his mother, siblings, and close friends. Marcus himself had fallen fast and hard, so much so that within a year, he proposed. Ebony, with tears in her eyes, said yes, without hesitation. To the outside world, it seemed like they were living a fairy tale. But beneath the surface, cracks were starting to form, cracks that Marcus couldn't see but would later become impossible to ignore. Their wedding day was a dream come true for both of them. Held in the historic Houston Baptist Church, it was a grand affair attended by over 200 guests. The ceremony was perfect. Marcus stood at the altar, his heart racing as he watched Ebony glide down the aisle in a shimmering white gown. She looked like a goddess, and Marcus couldn't help but think how lucky he was to have found such a beautiful and loving woman. But even on their wedding day, there were subtle hints of unease, things Marcus brushed aside in the excitement of the moment. Ebony seemed distant at times, her gaze lingering in the distance, lost in thought. When they exchanged vows, Marcus noticed her hands trembling ever so slightly. He chalked it up to wedding day nerves, but there was something else there, something that felt off. Their honeymoon was equally luxurious. Marcus spared no expense, whisking Ebony away to the Caribbean for 2 weeks of sun, sand, and endless romance. Yet, despite the beauty of their surroundings, Marcus felt something was holding Ebony back. She would occasionally withdraw, become quiet, and her eyes would take on a distant look, as if she were wrestling with something deep within. When Marcus pressed her about what was bothering her, she'd quickly brush it off, blaming it on stress or homesickness. "Don't worry about me, baby," she'd say, wrapping her arms around him and giving him the kind of smile that could melt his heart. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that there was something Ebony wasn't telling him. After the honeymoon, life moved forward as any newlywed couple would expect. They settled into their small but cozy home on the outskirts of Houston, a quiet neighborhood that offered them the privacy they craved. On weekends, Marcus worked around the house, fixing up the yard, while Ebony focused on growing her beauty business. It was the kind of life Marcus had always dreamed of. He had the perfect wife, a comfortable home, and a future that looked bright. But as the weeks turned into months, the unease in their relationship grew. Marcus began to notice subtle changes in Ebony's behavior. She became more secretive, locking her phone whenever Marcus was around and disappearing for hours at a time without explanation. She started working late, claiming she had more clients, but when Marcus dropped by the salon to surprise her, he would often find it empty. The excuses became frequent: meetings with friends he'd never heard of, phone calls she would take in hushed tones. Marcus's suspicions grew, but he didn't want to believe something was wrong. He loved Ebony deeply, and the thought of her keeping something from him felt like a knife twisting in his gut. He convinced himself that he was overthinking it, that the stresses of married life were simply catching up to them. After all, no relationship is perfect, right? But the tension only increased. Intimacy became less frequent, and when it did happen, it felt strained. Ebony would turn away afterward, refusing to look Marcus in the eyes. She often seemed on the verge of saying something, her lips parting as if to reveal a truth she couldn't bring herself to share. It wasn't until one fateful night that everything unraveled. Marcus had always been the type to respect Ebony's privacy, but his growing doubts led him to do something he never thought he would. He decided to search through her things. While Ebony was out with friends, Marcus rifled through her drawers, looking for something, anything, to explain the growing distance between them. That's when he found it, a small box hidden in the back of the closet, tucked away under piles of old clothes. Inside, he discovered documents that made his blood run cold. There, among various papers, was a birth certificate bearing a name Marcus had never seen before: Elijah Davis. Confused, he dug deeper and found medical records dating back years, records detailing Ebony's transition from male to female. Marcus's world stopped. He felt as though the air had been sucked out of the room. His hands trembled as the weight of the revelation crashed down on him. The woman he had married, the woman he had vowed to love and cherish, had kept this from him. Ebony had been born male, and she had never told him. For Marcus, it wasn't just a secret, it was a betrayal of everything he believed in, everything he thought their relationship had been built on. His mind raced with a mix of emotions: anger, confusion, heartbreak. How could she have hidden something so important from him? The person he thought he knew felt like a stranger. This discovery would prove to be the first domino in a chain of events that would end in unimaginable horror. What Marcus didn't know at that moment was that his feelings of betrayal and anger were about to spiral into something far darker, something violent and deadly. Marcus sat in stunned silence, staring at the documents spread across the bed. His mind raced with questions, but no answers seemed to come. How long had Ebony been hiding this? How could she have deceived him about something so fundamental? For hours, Marcus remained in the house alone, the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall only amplifying his growing rage and sense of betrayal. When Ebony finally returned home that evening, she was greeted by the sight of Marcus sitting on the edge of their bed, her most intimate secret laid out in plain view. The moment her eyes fell on the documents, her face drained of color. She froze in the doorway, her hand tightening on the doorknob as though she were preparing to run. "You lied to me." Marcus's voice was barely a whisper, trembling with rage. He stood slowly, holding the papers in his hand like evidence of a crime. "Who are you, Ebony? No, what are you?" Ebony's heart sank as the reality of the situation hit her. She had always known this day might come, the day when her past would catch up with her, but she never imagined it would happen like this. She had hoped to tell Marcus in her own time, in her own way, but fear of losing him had kept her silent for too long. "Marcus, please," she began. "I was going to tell you. I swear I was, but I didn't know how. I love you. This doesn't change who I am, who we are." She stepped cautiously toward him, her eyes filling with tears. But her words only fueled the fire inside Marcus. "Doesn't change who you are. You've been lying to me this whole time, Ebony." His voice grew louder, more frantic, as his mind struggled to process the shock. "You tricked me into marrying you. Do you know what you've done? I gave you everything, my love, my loyalty, my life, and this whole time, you've been lying to me about the most basic thing. Who you really are." Ebony's tears streamed down her face, but she held her ground, desperate to make him understand. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to lose you, Marcus. You mean everything to me. I thought if you knew, you wouldn't love me anymore." Marcus's face twisted in fury. "You thought right," he spat, his words laced with venom. His anger spiraled out of control, his mind a whirlwind of betrayal, disgust, and confusion. The room seemed to close in on him, his once beloved wife now feeling like a complete stranger. The argument grew more intense with every passing minute. Marcus's anger was like a live wire, unpredictable and volatile, while Ebony was trapped between trying to explain herself and fearing what Marcus might do next. She had never seen him like this, so out of control, so full of hate. As Marcus yelled, pacing back and forth across the room, Ebony's heart pounded in her chest. She could see the rage building inside him, and it terrified her. "Marcus, please, just calm down. We can talk about this. I'll answer any questions you have, just please don't do anything rash." But Marcus wasn't hearing her anymore. In his mind, everything he had built with her had been a lie, and he couldn't think straight. All he saw was red. His hands clenched into fists, his breath quickened. "Calm down," he barked. "You've been lying to me for years, and you want me to just calm down?" In a blind moment of rage, Marcus stormed into the garage, his eyes landing on a hammer. Without hesitation, he grabbed it and returned to the house with a chilling determination. As Ebony stood frozen in the bedroom, her eyes wide with fear, Marcus approached with the hammer in hand. Without warning, he swung the hammer down with brutal force. Ebony screamed, trying to shield herself, but Marcus was relentless. Blow after blow, he struck her with terrifying fury, her cries for mercy drowned out by his blind rage. The walls of their home were soon splattered with blood as Marcus continued the savage assault. The brutality of the attack was so severe that detectives later described it as one of the bloodiest crime scenes they had ever encountered. But Marcus didn't stop there. The trial that followed captivated the nation, not only because of the gruesome details but also because of the contentious debates surrounding the case. Marcus's legal team mounted a defense centered around emotional distress, portraying him as a man betrayed to the brink of madness. They argued that the shock of discovering Ebony's past, combined with his deeply held values, had driven him to an uncontrollable rage. Marcus Johnson was pushed to his breaking point, his defense attorney declared in court. The revelation of such a deeply personal and life-altering secret took a toll on his emotional stability, leading to this tragic and violent outburst. The prosecution, however, painted a much darker picture. They described Marcus as a cold-blooded killer who had brutally murdered his wife in a fit of rage. They argued that no amount of betrayal could justify the level of violence Marcus had inflicted on Ebony. This was not just a crime of passion, the prosecutor said during closing arguments. This was a premeditated act of pure savagery. Marcus Johnson had every opportunity to walk away, to seek help, but instead, he chose to end Ebony's life in the most horrific way imaginable. Throughout the trial, Ebony's private life was dragged into the public spotlight. The revelation of her gender identity became the focus of media coverage, overshadowing the brutality of the crime itself. Ebony's friends and family were devastated, not only by her loss but by the way her memory was being treated. Her mother took the stand, her voice shaking with emotion. "My daughter was a kind, loving person," she said through tears. "She didn't deserve this. All she wanted was to be loved for who she was. And for that, she was taken from us." The courtroom fell silent as Ebony's mother held up a photo of her daughter, smiling and radiant. "This is who she was," she said. "Not a secret, not a lie, just Ebony." The jury was visibly moved, but the trial remained deeply polarizing. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered, some holding signs in support of Ebony and others condemning her for not disclosing her past. Social media became a battleground for debates on gender identity, marriage, and the boundaries of trust. After weeks of testimony, closing arguments, and emotional pleas from both sides, the jury reached a verdict. Marcus Johnson was found guilty of first-degree murder. When the sentence was read, Marcus showed little reaction. His face remained blank, as though he had already resigned himself to his fate. The judge sentenced Marcus to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As he was led out of the courtroom, he glanced briefly at Ebony's family, their faces etched with grief and anger. It was clear that no amount of justice could ever undo the damage he had caused. The case left a deep scar on the community, both in Houston and across the nation. Ebony's friends and supporters launched a "Justice for Ebony" movement, advocating for greater protections and rights for transgender people. The movement brought attention to the alarming rates of violence faced by transgender women, particularly Black transgender women, and sparked important conversations about acceptance and understanding. The home where Ebony had been murdered was eventually sold, but neighbors said it never felt the same. The horrific events that took place there left a lingering shadow over the community. Marcus's family struggled to come to terms with what he had done, with some members claiming they never truly knew the man capable of such violence. Ebony's memory lived on through the movement created in her honor. Vigils were held across the country, and her story became a rallying cry for those fighting against hate and violence. While the case had started as a tale of betrayal and violence, it ultimately became a call to action for love, understanding, and equality. This case wasn't just about murder, it was a chilling reminder of how secrets, betrayal, and societal pressures can collide in the most tragic ways. Ebony's life, though cut short, inspired a movement for change, leaving a legacy that would not be forgotten. The aftermath of Ebony's murder and the trial continued to reverberate for years. The "Justice for Ebony" movement gained national attention, highlighting the broader issues of violence against transgender individuals and sparking conversations about trust and identity in relationships. Ebony's friends and supporters organized memorial events, ensuring that her story would not fade into obscurity. Her mother became a prominent advocate, speaking at rallies and events to raise awareness about the dangers faced by Black transgender women. "My daughter's life mattered," she said at one gathering. "She deserved to live her truth without fear. No one should have to hide who they are to feel safe." Ebony's death also prompted significant policy discussions. Advocacy groups pushed for stricter hate crime laws and better support systems for transgender individuals, including mental health resources and community outreach programs. In Houston, a local LGBTQ+ shelter named a new wing in her honor, offering housing and counseling for those in need. Marcus, meanwhile, began his life sentence in a maximum security prison. Despite his defense team's efforts to appeal the ruling, the evidence of his crime was too overwhelming. Inside prison, Marcus became a recluse, avoiding interactions with other inmates. Reports from prison staff described him as a man haunted by his actions, frequently breaking down during routine conversations and refusing counseling. In a rare interview conducted 2 years after the trial, Marcus spoke from his prison cell, his voice heavy with regret. "I'll never forgive myself for what I did," he said. "I let my anger and my pride destroy everything. I didn't see Ebony for who she truly was because I was too blinded by what I thought I was supposed to believe." Despite his regret, the public remained divided. Some continued to see Marcus as a victim of deception, while others condemned him as a violent perpetrator who had taken an innocent life. The case became a lightning rod for debates about accountability, with legal scholars analyzing whether Marcus's discovery of Ebony's past could be considered a mitigating factor in his actions. Ebony's legacy extended beyond her community. Documentaries, podcasts, and books were created to explore the complexities of her life and the tragedy of her death. Her story was featured in a critically acclaimed Netflix documentary, Hidden Truths: The Story of Ebony Davis, which delved into her journey as a transgender woman and the societal pressures that contributed to her fate. The documentary brought her story to a global audience, further amplifying calls for justice and equality. For the neighbors who had lived near Marcus and Ebony, the tragedy remained a dark chapter in their lives. The house where the murder occurred sat vacant for years, its presence a grim reminder of the horror that unfolded within its walls. Eventually, the property was demolished, and a memorial garden was established in its place, dedicated to victims of domestic violence and hate crimes. Ebony's friends and family found solace in the impact of her story. Her life, though tragically cut short, became a symbol of resilience in the fight for acceptance. As one friend put it during a memorial event, "Ebony's truth didn't kill her. The world's inability to accept it did. But we won't let her death be in vain. We'll keep fighting for a world where everyone can live without fear." Years later, the community in Houston continued to heal, but the lessons from Ebony's life and death remained a vital part of the conversation. Her story became a reminder of the human cost of prejudice, secrecy, and unchecked rage, inspiring change and fostering empathy in ways that would resonate for generations. If you're moved by Ebony's story and want to join the conversation about justice, acceptance, and understanding, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth true crime cases that uncover the raw truths behind the headline.